Wealthy businessman Jonathan Whitmore stood still, hidden behind the curtains of his private veranda in Vermont. What he saw outside took his breath away. A black construction worker, hands rough and skin sun-kissed from long hours under the sun, was gently feeding a little girl on a garden bench. The child was his own daughter, Eliza, the same Eliza he had struggled to face since the tragic car crash that stole her sight nearly 2 years earlier. "There you go, sweetheart. Just one last spoon, all right?" the man said softly, his tone warm and patient. Eliza giggled, a pure, ringing laugh Jonathan hadn't heard in years. At just 8 years old, that sound had become a rare gift in their home. And almost never in his presence. She reached up, her small fingers touching the man's cheek with an ease that stunned Jonathan. "Tell me more about the flowers," she asked, eyes closed. "I want to imagine them like you see them." Jonathan felt a sharp pull in his chest, as if guilt itself had taken physical form. He stepped backward, retreating into the shadows of the house. How could this stranger, this man named Darius Thompson, who had been hired just 2 weeks ago to lead the landscaping project, form a bond so deep with a child Jonathan barely recognized anymore? Have you ever experienced something like this? Let us know in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from, because your story matters too. Whitmore Developments was one of the most prestigious firms in the Northeast, known for designing upscale homes that shaped entire neighborhoods. But Jonathan Whitmore, master builder of luxury dreams, couldn't rebuild the one thing that mattered most: his connection with Eliza. The accident happened on a quiet Sunday, a speeding truck, a sharp turn, and then silence. Eliza's world went dark that day. Jonathan had been driving. He came out without a scratch, at least on the outside, but inside he was shattered. He buried himself in meetings, projects, deadlines, anything to avoid the crushing weight of his own remorse. Since then, Eliza had been raised by an ever-rotating team of caregivers, while her father lived a few floors above, close in space, miles apart in heart. When Darius and his crew arrived to restore the garden, Jonathan didn't expect anything to change. But now, everything was shifting, and he had no idea how to handle it. "Mr. Whitmore," came the voice of Mrs. Langley, his longtime housekeeper. "There's a call for you. Tokyo wants confirmation on the Kyoto proposal." He nodded without thinking, glancing one last time through the glass doors. As he walked the long marble hallway, his eyes landed on a framed photo of his late wife. "Madeline, you would have known what to do," he whispered. "You always did." That afternoon, during a high-stakes meeting with investors, Jonathan sat in silence, his mind replaying every second of what he'd seen in the garden. That evening, as he returned home, Mrs. Langley was waiting by the stairs, her expression tight. "Sir," she began, "Eliza's music tutor called. She missed her 3rd session." Jonathan frowned. "Didn't the assistant bring her?" "She refused to go," the housekeeper said, hesitating. "She says she hates music now, because she can't see the keys." Jonathan's heart sank even lower. Madeline had been a gifted pianist, and Eliza used to adore those lessons. That night, unable to sleep, Jonathan headed downstairs for a glass of water, but then he heard voices outside. Carefully, he approached the back door. There they were again, Eliza and Darius, sitting near, the fountain under the moonlight. "My dad doesn't love me anymore," the girl said, her voice steady but heavy. "Not since I lost my sight. He can't even look at me." "Don't say that, little one," Darius replied gently, but with strength. "Sometimes, when adults are hurting, they hide from what matters most." "Have you ever lost someone you loved?" Eliza asked. She waited for his answer. A long silence hung between them, before Darius finally spoke. "Yes," he said quietly. "My daughter, Amara. She would have been around your age now." Jonathan held his breath. There was something in Darius's voice, a depth, a weight, that pierced through his chest like a blade. "What happened to her?" Eliza asked softly. She got very sick, Darius replied, his voice steady but heavy. Leukemia. We battled for years, but in the end, he paused, taking a deep breath. I realized, Eliza, the time we get with the people we love, it's far too valuable to waste hiding from pain. Jonathan felt like the ground beneath him was disappearing. It wasn't caution that had kept him away from his daughter. It was fear. Cowardice. He hadn't protected her. He had abandoned her. As he climbed the stairs back to his lonely room, a single question played on loop in his head. What kind of father turns his back when his child needs him most, while a stranger, carrying heartbreak of his own, finds the courage to show up with love? But what Jonathan didn't know, what no one in that mansion knew, was that Darius Thompson was far more than just a kind-hearted gardener. His story was deeper, more unexpected than anyone could imagine. And in the days to come, truths would surface that would alter the course of every life entangled in this quiet collision of fate. If this story of loss, healing, and unlikely connection has moved you, subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Because the bond between these two men, scarred by grief but drawn together by the same little girl, is only the beginning. In the following days, Jonathan began digging into Darius's past. Discreetly, he hired a background check firm, something he often did in business. I want everything, he told the investigator on the phone, especially about the daughter he mentioned. As he spoke, his eyes stayed glued to the surveillance screen showing the garden in real time. There, he watched Darius guiding Eliza through the flower beds. He wasn't just doing his job. He was turning the garden into a world of touch and scent, a sanctuary of textures and meaning. Feel this, Darius said, as Eliza's fingers brushed a blooming rose. This red is like the warmth of sunlight on your face in the middle of July. Jonathan blinked. That metaphor stuck with him, echoing in his mind long after the camera turned off. 3 days later, a confidential envelope arrived. With trembling hands, Jonathan opened it. Darius Thompson, 43 years old. Graduated with honors in structural engineering. Married to Layla Thompson, deceased, cancer. Father to Amara Thompson, deceased, leukemia at age 7. After both losses, he stepped away from his career. A friend reported he needed to work with his hands to survive the grief. Started in landscaping, later moved into small-scale construction. Jonathan sat in silence. This man wasn't a simple worker. He was someone who had chosen manual labor as a way to stay sane. Someone who had lost everything and still found a way to smile. That night, for the first time in nearly 2 years, Jonathan opened Eliza's door. She was sleeping. Quietly, he stepped closer and gently touched her hair. A simple gesture, but a mountain moved. The next morning, he did something that shocked even himself. He cancelled his meetings, cleared his schedule, and packed a picnic basket. When Eliza came down for breakfast, he was already waiting. I thought we could spend some time in the garden today, he said with a nervous smile. Eliza stared at him in disbelief, then slowly lit up. Really, Dad? She asked, hope flickering in her voice. Aren't you too busy? That question broke something deep inside him. They spent the day outside. At first, it was clumsy, silent. They sat on a bench, close to where Darius was tending to the flower beds. When the man noticed them, he started to step away. Darius! Eliza called out, instantly recognizing his steps. My dad's with me today. Come meet him. Eliza's voice was full of joy. The two men exchanged a look. There were no words, but everything was understood. In the weeks that followed, a rhythm quietly settled into place. Jonathan watched from a distance, trying to grasp how a man who had lost so much could still give so completely. One calm afternoon, while the wind played softly with the garden leaves, Jonathan walked over to Darius. "How do you do it?" he asked, his voice stripped of all pretense. "After everything you've been through, how can you be so present for my daughter when I can barely breathe in the same room as her?" Darius paused, resting his tools beside the garden bench. "When Amara was in the hospital," he began slowly, "she asked me to make a promise. 'Daddy, promise me you'll keep seeing the colors,' she said. At the time, I didn't get it. I thought she meant painting or something like that." He glanced over at Eliza, sitting by the fountain, her fingers brushing the water. "But now I know. Your daughter is still here, Mr. Whitmore. She's alive. She doesn't need you to focus on what she lost. She needs you to see her light, to feel her colors." Those words struck Jonathan like lightning in a storm. For 2 years, all he had seen was blindness. Not the vibrant, brilliant soul still shining inside his little girl. The next day, something unexpected happened. Back in his office, Jonathan received an unmarked envelope. Inside, a medical file and a note. "You deserve to know the truth about the doctor who diagnosed your daughter." Jonathan's hands began to tremble as he flipped through the pages. The neurologist, Dr. Kellerman, the one who had declared Eliza's blindness as permanent, had a long history of questionable practices, rushed diagnoses, experimental treatments, without consent, and a trail of lawsuits, all buried under confidentiality deals. Jonathan's blood turned cold. Was it possible Eliza's condition wasn't final? Had there been hope, a chance that Dr. Kellerman had dismissed? Then one detail jumped out. Case: Amara Thompson, misdiagnosed, declared terminal. Jonathan's breath caught. The file slipped from his hands and scattered across the floor. A pattern was beginning to emerge. Eliza's accident, Amara's death, and Darius in his garden. It didn't feel like coincidence anymore. Could it be that the man comforting his daughter had once lost his own to the same doctor? Could this all be part of something bigger, darker? That evening, as Jonathan drove through the empty city streets, he couldn't shake the storm inside him. Was Darius really there to help? Or was this about something else entirely? Revenge, justice, redemption? The answers were coming, and they would unravel everything Jonathan thought he understood about loyalty, guilt, and truth. The dim glow of his office lamp barely lit the storm of papers scattered across his desk: medical records, bank statements, photographs. In the center, a snapshot of Darius with a smiling little girl, Amara. "The same faulty scans," Jonathan muttered. "The same doctor. The same treatment that never should have been given." He connected the dots, and a terrifying picture began to take shape. At dawn, he called his legal team. "I want a full report on Dr. Kellerman," he ordered. "Every transaction, every hidden account, every name behind him." When they left, Jonathan remained at the window, watching the garden below. There was Eliza, learning to identify flowers by scent, with Darius kneeling beside her. Their closeness no longer felt strange, it felt dangerous. "Sir," his assistant's voice interrupted. "Darius is on the line. He says it's urgent." Jonathan hesitated, then picked up the call. Darius sounded tense. "Mr. Whitmore, I won't be able to come in tomorrow. I have a medical appointment for Eliza." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" he asked sharply. "Why are you taking my daughter to a doctor?" A cold wave ran through him, and for the first time in weeks, he felt truly afraid. A long, heavy pause filled the phone line. "I think we should talk," Darius said finally. "Face to face, tonight, after Eliza's asleep." The rest of Jonathan's day passed in a fog. He cancelled every meeting, closed his laptop, and drove back to the estate without another word. Outside, in the golden light of late afternoon, he found Eliza and Darius together in the garden, laughing, sharing stories like they had for weeks. But something had shifted inside him. What once seemed comforting now felt like a hidden danger. Was this kindness? Just a cover? That night, after Eliza had drifted into sleep, Jonathan walked into his office. Darius was already there. No small talk, no excuses. He placed a folder on the desk and looked Jonathan straight in the eyes. "I'm assuming you've already seen some of this," he began, his tone calm but firm. "I was the one who sent the first file. I needed to be sure you were paying attention." Jonathan's voice was cold, controlled. "And what exactly is it that you think I've missed, Mr. Thompson?" Darius opened the folder. "Dr. Kellerman isn't just reckless. He's dangerous. He's experimenting on patients under the radar. He manipulates diagnoses so he can include kids in unapproved treatment trials." He took a breath, his fingers trembling slightly. My Amara didn't have terminal cancer. She had something treatable. But he ignored it, deliberately, to fit her into his data. "And Eliza," he looked down, "she isn't permanently blind. With proper care, she could see again." Jonathan's entire world tilted. His voice cracked. "Why didn't you go? To the authorities?" "I did," Darius replied. "But Kellerman's protected by powerful people. I have the documents, but I don't have the reach to expose him." "So you used my daughter to get to me?" Jonathan snapped, his voice rising with fury. Darius's eyes narrowed, his pain flaring beneath the surface. "No," he said simply. "I came here because I knew one of his former patients lived here. But I bonded with Eliza because she reminded me of Amara. Because no child should go through what they did." Jonathan didn't know whether to believe him. He stood frozen, his mind at war with itself. "I'm not asking you to trust me," Darius continued. "I'm asking you to trust the facts." He slid another folder across the table. "I contacted Dr. Alina Graves, one of the top specialists in neuroocular recovery. She reviewed Eliza's case, and she agrees. Her condition is reversible, but we have to act fast, and in complete secrecy." "Why?" Jonathan asked. "Why can't we involve others?" "Because Eliza isn't the only one. There are more children, and I think Kellerman is preparing to start something bigger, something worse." Darius looked down, his voice almost breaking. "Years ago, I tried to confront him directly. A few days later, Amara developed complications out of nowhere. 2 days after that, she was gone." The room went still. Even the air seemed to freeze. A respected doctor, sacrificing children for progress. Jonathan struggled to speak. "I want you to take Eliza to Dr. Graves," Darius said. "She's willing to meet quietly tomorrow." "If she confirms that Eliza can recover, then—" "We'll do more than that," Jonathan cut in. There was fire in his voice now, his fear replaced by something colder, sharper. "If what you're saying is true, we will take him down, and everyone protecting him." As the night wore on, the outline of a plan began to form. Jonathan would use everything at his disposal. Private, investigators, the press, legal experts, connections. Darius would bring the evidence, names, documents, and stories from the other families he had found over the years. Together, they would shine a light into the darkest corners of medicine and protect the children still at risk. The next morning, under the appearance of a simple family day out, Jonathan took Eliza to a quiet private clinic run by Dr. Alina Graves. The evaluation took hours. Every possible test was done, and the results confirmed the impossible. Eliza's blindness was not permanent. The original diagnosis was not just wrong. It was either deeply negligent or deliberately falsified. As they stepped outside into the cold air, Jonathan held his daughter's hand tighter, his heart filled with something new. Purpose. What had started as fear had become a mission. 2 fathers, a white corporate giant and a black man who once laid bricks to survive grief, now stood together against a system that had failed them both. Their daughters had been victims of the same lie, but their bond had created something stronger than anger or loss. What Dr. Kellerman never expected was that While he continued his daily routine within polished clinics and luxury offices, a storm was quietly building against him, one that would rip apart the empire he had constructed on deception and pain. In the courtroom, no one spoke as Kellerman was brought in wearing handcuffs. His kingdom collapsed in a matter of hours, brought down by an unlikely alliance between Jonathan Whitmore and Darius Thompson. "This is only the beginning," the lead prosecutor declared. More than 40 children had already been identified as victims of his fraudulent diagnoses. Outside, the courthouse was packed with reporters. Jonathan and Darius stood side by side, Eliza holding both their hands, her face calm, her eyes beginning to follow light and motion. "Mr. Whitmore, how did you uncover the truth?" a journalist shouted. "The truth has a way of surfacing," Jonathan answered, glancing at Darius. "Sometimes we have to lose everything before we can see what really matters." 3 months later, a new clinic opened its doors quietly, without fanfare, the Amara Foundation. Built in record time, funded entirely by Jonathan's company, the center was already treating 15 children who had been misdiagnosed by Dr. Kellerman. "We didn't just want justice," Darius said at the opening ceremony. "We wanted to turn pain into something that could protect others." Dr. Graves, now the head of the foundation, had carefully refined Kellerman's original research. Ironically, his experiments, if used ethically, could have saved lives, including Amara's Eliza, whose vision improved day by day, became the public face of the foundation. Her story gave families the courage to seek second opinions, to question what seemed final. Meanwhile, Kellerman's entire network unraveled. His finances collapsed. Hospitals connected to him were hit with massive lawsuits. Colleagues who once defended him were brought to court. The same system that had shielded his cruelty was now tearing itself apart to correct it. Jonathan, profoundly changed by everything, shifted the direction of his company. Whitmore Developments now dedicated a third of its efforts to building children's hospitals and supporting medical research. "Eliza taught me that having eyes isn't the same as seeing what's important," he admitted in a rare interview. One afternoon, while Eliza played in the garden with other children from the foundation, Jonathan found Darius sitting quietly, watching. Tears shimmered in his eyes. "Amara would have been 11 today," he said softly. Jonathan nodded. They sat in silence for a moment. Then he asked, "Do you think we honored her memory?" Darius didn't look away from the children. "Justice," he said, "isn't the same as revenge. Revenge would have been destroying Kellerman and walking away. Justice is making sure no child ever suffers again from what he did." "You know what lingers in my mind the most?" Jonathan said quietly, standing beside Darius in the garden. "If you hadn't shown up, I would have lived the rest of my life believing my daughter's blindness was forever, and I would have stayed locked inside that lie, never knowing the truth." Darius nodded. "And if you hadn't listened," he replied, "I never would have had the strength to bring Dr. Kellerman down. My voice wasn't enough on its own." That same week, a new patient arrived at the Amara Foundation. Her name was Lily Weston, just 7 years old. Diagnosed with the same condition as Eliza, her parents had run out of hope. They couldn't afford advanced care until they saw a news segment about the clinic that had helped other children see again. "You can always tell," Dr. Graves explained gently during Lily's first visit. "There's this moment where their eyes begin to catch the world around them, and then, suddenly, they shine, like they remember what light feels like." 1 year after Dr. Kellerman's conviction, the garden at the foundation came alive for a special occasion. Eliza, now nearly fully sighted, stood before a cake, surrounded by friends. She took a deep breath and blew out her candles, her laughter echoing through the trees. Beside her stood Lily and a handful of other children who had all once lived in darkness. Jonathan watched quietly, moved. He realized in that moment his blindness had been lifted too, not the kind you cure with medicine, but the blindness of the soul, the kind that sees only success, only numbers, only power. "Before you came into our lives," he said softly to Darius, "I was alive, but not truly living. I was wealthy, but disconnected, building walls around myself instead of bridges to others. There's a blindness, worse than losing your sight, he continued. It's when your eyes are open, but you still don't see what really matters. On the main wall of the foundation, a bronze plaque shimmered in the sunlight. In memory of Amara Thompson, who taught us to see with our hearts, what began with loss grew into something unshakable, an unexpected bond between two men from different worlds, brought together by grief, transformed by love, and united by a shared mission. It redefined what it means to be family, because, in the end, the deepest connections aren't always written in blood, but in courage, in compassion, and in the choice to stand together when it matters most. If this story of justice and redemption moved something in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us all. Sometimes you have to lose everything to truly find what's worth fighting for.